When someone breaks your heart, the natural instinct is to want to retaliate, to make them feel what they made you feel. But the truth is, heartbreak is not about getting even. It's about awakening. It's about recognizing that what just happened was not the end of you, but the end of a cycle or pattern or an illusion. And that is where your true power lies. You're not here to break anyone else in revenge. You're here to break the spell they had over you. You see, when your heart is broken, it's not just an emotional wound. It's a transfer of energy. Someone came into your life, gained your trust, earned your affection, and then shattered the image of what you believed to be real. That betrayal doesn't just hurt your feelings. It shakes your identity. It can leave you questioning your worth, your decisions, even your future. And that's where the real danger lies, not in what they did, but in what you start believing because of what. If you believe you were not enough, if you believe love always ends in pain, if you believe that you need them to be whole again, you've handed your power to them. But the moment you wake up and realize that this pain is not a curse but a call, everything shifts. You begin to understand that the heartbreak didn't take anything from you that was truly yours. What it did was expose everything you were giving away that was never theirs to take in the first place. Your time, your loyalty, your emotional peace, your dreams, your self-respect. When you gave your heart, you handed over access to your entire emotional house. And they walked in with muddy shoes. Now, let's talk about breaking his heart, but not in the way you might think. This isn't about lashing out or causing drama. It's not about late night texts or calculated silence meant to provoke a reaction. This is about breaking the illusion he had that you needed him to survive. That illusion gave him the upper hand. That illusion let him believe he could mistreat you and still have a place in your life. Breaking his heart means breaking his expectation that you would stay broken, that you would keep calling, that you would keep waiting, that you would keep forgiving behavior that didn't deserve grace. The moment you rise, the moment you get better instead of bitter, the moment you choose your peace over your pride, that is when he starts to feel the absence of the power he once had over you. People always think power is in the words you say, but in truth, it's in the energy you reclaim. Every time you stop checking his social media, you take your power back. Every time you resist the urge to explain why you've gone silent, you take your power back. Every time you choose not to respond to the memories that pop into your mind, you take your power back. And that process, it's not loud. It's not flashy. It's internal, sacred, and deeply personal. You see, they don't teach this kind of strength in movies or fairy tales. No one tells you how strong a woman has to be to rise after being emotionally gutted by someone she trusted. No one applauds the quiet moments of choosing healing over hatred. But those are the real victories. That's where you start to recognize that you were never broken. You were blindfolded. You were loving from your wound instead of from your will. And now that you see clearly, you realize you were never powerless. You just hadn't activated your awareness yet. And once you reclaim your emotional power, something profound happens. He starts to feel it. Not because you did anything cruel or public, but because energy never lies. When you are obsessed, chasing, pleading, overgiving, he felt in control. He felt like he had the upper hand. But when your energy withdraws, when your soul detaches, when your joy is no longer tied to his name, he begins to feel the weight of what he lost. And that's when the real heartbreak begins. Not for you, but for him. Not because you tried to hurt him, but because he realized too late what he can never access again: your peace, your presence, your love. Not the needy love, not the begging love, but the rare, divine, high frequency love that only a healed woman can give. So breaking his heart isn't about revenge. It's not about matching his disrespect or outdoing his silence. It's about dissolving the hold he once had over you. It's about becoming so grounded in your worth that his absence no longer feels like a loss, but a gain in clarity. You start to look back and thank life for the rejection because it redirected you. You start to feel gratitude for the pain because it peeled back your illusion. You stop craving closure because you gave it to yourself. And in doing so, you take every broken piece of your heart and transform it into a weapon of purpose, not to harm, but to guard yourself. Most people think healing is a soft process, but it's not. It's fierce. It's fiery. It's revolutionary. You're breaking generational patterns. You're refusing to settle. You're choosing yourself over validation. That's the kind of power that sends shockwaves, not just to him, but to every version of yourself that once thought she couldn't live without someone who didn't know how to value her. And that's when he feels it. Not when you cry, not when you plead, not when you retaliate, but when you rise. Detachment is not about not caring. It's about caring deeply for yourself, enough to stop participating in what drains your spirit. When you are emotionally entangled with someone who has hurt you, every thought, every memory, every unanswered question pulls you deeper into a cycle of suffering. You're not just hurt, you're hooked. Hooked on what could have been, hooked on who you thought they were. Hooked on the false hope that maybe they'll come back and make it right. But detachment is the moment you realize that staying emotionally connected to someone who has proven they don't value your heart is a slow form of self-destruction. It doesn't start with a grand declaration. It starts with a whisper in your spirit that says, enough. Enough crying over someone who isn't crying over you. Enough trying to decode mixed signals. Enough waiting for a message that may never come. Enough trying to prove your worth to someone who saw it and still chose to walk away. That's when detachment begins. And make no mistake, detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's the powerful, conscious decision to stop investing your energy into what is no longer growing you. Most people think that to win someone back or to show them what they lost, you have to do something visible. You have to make them jealous, show off your glow up, post pictures, date someone new. But that's still emotional attachment. That's still seeking a reaction. True detachment is silent. It's not performative. It's the disappearance of energy. And when your energy vanishes, that's when the shift begins. Not just in you, but in them. Because people can feel it when they no longer occupy space in your spirit. When you detach, you stop justifying their behavior. You stop wondering what you could have done differently. You stop trying to hold together a story that was never yours to carry. You accept the facts, no matter how painful they are. You accept that maybe they never loved you the way you loved them. You accept that maybe their silence is their answer. You accept that sometimes people walk away, not because you weren't enough, but because they never intended to stay. And while that truth stings, it's also freeing. Because now you're no longer stuck in the cycle of false hope. You're no longer waiting. You're no longer replaying old memories and confusing them for promises. Detachment gives you back to yourself. It clears the fog. It silences the noise. It reminds you that your peace is too precious to be placed in the hands of someone who didn't know what to do with your presence. And the most radical act of self-respect is choosing not to beg for love, attention, or closure. When you detach, you stop chasing, you stop calling, you stop caring about what they think, who they're with, or whether they'll ever come around. You start investing in your own growth. You go to bed without checking your phone. You wake up without wondering if they'll text. You start reading again, creating again, loving yourself again. And they feel it. Oh, they feel it. Because emotional attachment is like a cord. And when you cut it, something shifts in the universe. They don't feel your energy anymore. They don't feel your pull. They don't sense your longing. And the silence becomes deafening. Not for you, but for them. Not because you try to hurt them. Not because you wanted revenge. But because you stopped feeding the connection. You stopped showing up energetically. And people can survive your absence, but they cannot survive the absence of the energy they used to feed off of. Detachment doesn't mean you don't remember them. It doesn't mean you don't occasionally feel the ache. It doesn't mean you're immune to the memories. It means you're no longer willing to let those emotions run your life. You feel them, you acknowledge them, and you move through them, not around them. You stop obsessing over the why and start focusing on the what now. You understand that healing is not about forgetting. It's about remembering without being paralyzed. It's about looking at what happened and saying, yes, that hurt me deeply, but I refuse to let it define me. There is unmatched power in emotional discipline, in not reacting, in not responding, in simply observing your thoughts and choosing peace over chaos. That is what detachment teaches you. You begin to realize that your emotions are messengers, not masters. You're allowed to feel them, but you don't have to obey them. You start to become the master of your internal world, and that mastery reflects outwardly. People see the shift. They feel it in your demeanor, in your silence, in the way you no longer show up with desperation. You show up with dignity. You start to notice how much lighter your life becomes without the emotional weight. Your body feels calmer, your mind clearer, your soul more aligned. You start focusing on goals again. You start becoming unavailable to nonsense. You stop explaining yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you. You begin to value your time, your space, your energy. And in that space of emotional detachment, you become magnetic, because nothing is more attractive than someone who doesn't need validation to know their worth. There is a sacred transformation that takes place when you finally shift your attention inward. After heartbreak, most people instinctively reach outward. They look for distractions, for replacements, for explanations, for any sign from the one who caused the pain. But healing doesn't live out there. Healing doesn't wait at the end of a conversation, a text, or an apology. Healing begins the moment you turn the focus away from them and toward yourself. That's when the work starts. That's when you reclaim your power. Because until you do that, your peace, your growth, your confidence, all of it remains chained to the actions of someone who decided you weren't a priority. Turning inward doesn't mean isolation. It doesn't mean becoming hard or bitter. It means becoming deeply present with yourself, probably for the first time in a long time. It means asking, who was I before I gave my heart away so freely? It means nurturing the parts of you that you neglected while pouring everything into someone who couldn't receive your depth. You see, so often we abandon ourselves in the name of love. We compromise, we overlook, we explain away red flags, we make excuses for treatment we would never advise someone else to tolerate. And in the end, we don't just lose the relationship, we lose parts of ourselves. That's the deeper heartbreak. but it's also the opportunity. Because when you're left standing in the silence, with no one else to turn to but yourself, you finally have the space to rebuild from the inside out. This is where the journey truly begins. Not the fake healing, the look good on the outside healing, but the real, gritty, transformative healing. The kind that doesn't need an audience. The kind that takes place in stillness. You start by sitting with your pain, not avoiding it. You write about it. You breathe through it. You let the tears come. You listen to what your body is trying to tell you. You notice the tension, the tightness in your chest, the ache that no distraction can soothe. And you don't run. You stay with it. You allow it to teach you what needs to be healed, what patterns need to be released, what old wounds were reopened in this heartbreak. Because the pain isn't just about them. It's about what inside of you was triggered by their absence. That's the real work. Healing the inner wound that was bleeding long before they came into your life. Maybe it's the wound of not feeling chosen. Maybe it's the ache of not feeling seen. Maybe it's the fear of being alone. The fear of not being enough. The fear of starting over. Whatever it is, turning inward forces you to meet it. And in meeting it, you begin to mend. You begin to mother yourself. You begin to become the protector, the lover, the supporter you were always seeking in someone else. You stop outsourcing your wholeness. You realize that no one can make you feel valuable unless you believe it first. No one can truly love you the way you crave unless you first love yourself with that same intensity. This is where your identity starts to reshape. This is where you redefine what you will and won't accept. You stop asking, why did he hurt me? And start asking, why did I allow someone to have that much power over me? You stop obsessing over their silence and start honoring your voice. You realize that the most dangerous thing you can ever do is ignore your intuition. And the most powerful thing you can ever do is honor it. Every time you said, I feel like something's off, and ignored it, that was your spirit trying to guide you back home. Now you listen. Now you trust yourself. Now you make decisions from a place of worthiness, not desperation. And slowly things begin to shift. You start waking up with clarity instead of confusion. You start enjoying your own company. You start investing in your goals again, not as a distraction, but as a declaration. I am still here and I still matter. You move your body not to look good for someone else, but to reconnect with it. You spend time in nature, in books, in silence. Not because you're running from life, but because you're rebuilding your inner world. You speak kindly to yourself. You forgive yourself, not for loving them, but for forgetting yourself in the process. Inward work changes your energy. People notice it. They may not be able to explain it, but they feel it. They feel that you're no longer available for games, for crumbs, for emotional manipulation. They sense your groundedness. And ironically, that's when the person who hurt you often tries to return. But this time you're different. You don't need them to complete you. You don't need closure because you gave it to yourself. You don't crave their attention because you've fallen in love with your peace. What once felt like abandonment now feels like redirection. What once felt like rejection now feels like protection. You no longer view the breakup as something that broke you, but as the doorway that brought you back to yourself. And from this place of deep inner connection, you begin to create a new life. One rooted in authenticity, in boundaries, in intention. Not because you want to prove something to anyone, but because you finally understand that everything you were searching for in them already lives inside of you. There comes a moment after heartbreak when you realize that waiting is no longer an act of love. It's a form of self-neglect. Waiting for an apology, waiting for closure, waiting for them to suddenly wake up and realize your value. It's like putting your life on pause for someone who pressed play on theirs the moment they walked away. And while you're still stuck replaying every word, every moment, every scenario in your mind, they've already moved forward. This is the trap of emotional stagnation. When your body moves through the world, but your soul remains anchored to someone who left you behind. You tell yourself that maybe they'll come back. Maybe they just need time. Maybe they're confused. And you begin to romanticize their absence, filling in the gaps with the illusion of who they could become instead of accepting who they've already shown themselves to be. But here's the truth that breaks the illusion. People don't leave what they value. They don't silence what they cherish. They don't abandon what they plan to return to with care. So when someone walks away, when someone breaks your heart, the answer isn't to freeze your growth, hoping they'll circle back. The answer is to grow so fiercely that their return becomes irrelevant. The most powerful revenge is not bitterness. It's not public displays. It's not even confrontation. It's rising quietly, steadily, deliberately. You don't rise to show them anything. You rise because you remember who you were before they entered your life. You rise because you've cried enough, because you've begged enough, because you've waited enough, because you've waited enough, because you've realized that your worth is not a subject of debate or a puzzle for someone else to solve. It is a fact. And no one's inability to see it diminishes its truth. You shift your focus from them to you, from the story of what happened to the story you're creating now. And that shift is everything. That shift is what separates those who remain trapped in heartbreak from those who transform through it. Because every painful experience is an invitation to come home to yourself, to get clear about your standards, to understand your patterns, to evaluate what within you was willing to tolerate what you knew wasn't aligned. And when you turn your pain into power, something extraordinary happens. You no longer need their validation. You no longer crave their presence. You no longer wish for them to return. This is where growth becomes your rebellion. Not the loud, aggressive kind of rebellion, but the soft, disciplined, consistent act of choosing yourself daily. You start showing up for your dreams. You focus on your health. You get serious about your vision. You surround yourself with people who reflect your worth back to you, not those who make you question it. You walk differently. You speak with conviction. You hold your boundaries not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Because once you've tasted peace, chaos becomes unappealing. Once you've felt wholeness, the desire for toxic connection fades. And as you grow, you begin to realize something else. People only meet you at the level of their own healing. Some people can't love you properly, not because you're unlovable, but because they are disconnected from themselves. They project, they escape, they run not from you, but from their own unresolved wounds. Understanding this doesn't excuse their behavior, but it frees you from personalizing it. It helps you stop internalizing their rejection as a reflection of your inadequacy. It helps you stop asking, why wasn't I enough? And start affirming, I was more than enough. They just weren't ready. Your growth dismantles the grip of heartbreak, not all at once, but inch by inch, day by day. Some mornings the pain will still rise with the sun. Some nights the ache will still creep in, but you keep moving. You keep building. You don't wait for the absence to stop hurting before you start living. You live through the pain. You build in the silence, because growth isn't about perfection, it's about direction. Every time you choose not to look back, not to stalk their page, not to respond to that message, every time you choose to protect your peace over feeding your past, you reclaim your power. And make no mistake, they will notice. People always feel it when you stop waiting, when your energy pulls back, when your name no longer lingers in their spirit the way it once did. And that's when they may return. That's when they may test the waters. But by then you've grown. You've seen too much, learned too much, healed too much to go backward. You don't punish them. You simply don't participate in the cycle anymore, because you finally understand that what broke you wasn't just them. It was your decision to shrink for love. And now your growth is non-negotiable. There is a point in your healing journey where you stop looking outward and start rewriting the narrative of what happened to you, not to justify their actions, but to redefine your own. You realize that heartbreak, as devastating as it is, also gives you the most valuable mirror you'll ever face. It reflects the very things you refuse to see. It forces you to look at yourself, not to blame yourself, but to become deeply, unshakably aware of your patterns, aware of your blind spots, aware of how you lost yourself while trying to be enough for someone who was never ready to receive you. And when you reach that awareness, something inside you shifts. This is when you begin to take responsibility, not for what they did, but for how long you stayed. For how many times you betrayed your own inner voice. For how many moments you felt unloved, but silenced your truth because you didn't want to seem too much or too needy. You start to understand that you weren't just heartbroken by their absence, you were heartbroken by your own self-abandonment. And that truth hurts more than anything, but it also sets you free. Because now you know exactly where to begin the real work. You don't need revenge. You don't need their remorse. What you need is to reclaim the parts of yourself you handed away piece by piece in the name of love. Reclaiming your identity after heartbreak isn't a single act, it's a series of choices. Small daily decisions to put yourself first. And not in a loud or aggressive way. It's quiet. It's subtle. It's the decision to speak up when something doesn't feel right. It's the choice to walk away instead of convincing someone to stay. It's the power in saying no without guilt. You begin to rebuild trust with yourself by honoring your own feelings. You stop gaslighting yourself. You stop asking for permission to feel. You stop justifying red flags. You start to realize that your intuition wasn't wrong. It was just inconvenient to listen to at the time. And now you're done ignoring it. You begin to see your patterns with clarity. Maybe you always felt the need to be the fixer, the pleaser, the one who holds it all together. Maybe you thought love had to be earned by being good enough, pretty enough, quiet enough, loyal enough. But now, you see how that mindset set you up to overextend yourself while under-receiving in return. You were overgiving to someone who barely met you halfway and calling it love. But love doesn't drain you. Love doesn't leave you questioning your worth. Real love reflects back to you the same energy you give, freely, openly, consistently. And that realization redefines what you're willing to accept going forward. There's no going back to who you were before they broke you, but that's the gift. Because the old you tolerated what the new you would never allow. The old you was seeking external approval. The new you is rooted in internal truth. And that truth begins to show up in every area of your life. You dress for yourself, not for attention. You pursue goals for your own fulfillment, not for validation. You let go of the urge to perform for love. You understand that love that must be earned isn't love. It's a transaction. And your spirit was never created to beg. This is where the real rebuilding happens. Not on the surface, not for social media, but deep inside. You start healing the inner child who thought they had to be perfect to be loved. You soothe the teenager inside you who felt rejected and never spoke about it. You hold space for the adult you who is still learning that peace is more important than closure. This isn't about fixing yourself because you were never broken. It's about remembering who you were before life taught you to shrink, before heartbreak made you question your worth, before you believed that someone leaving was proof that you were unlovable. You stop calling pain your home. You stop identifying with the wound. You realize that their inability to love you had nothing to do with your capacity to be loved. And in that awareness, you start to write a new story, not one where you are the victim, but one where you are the author. You choose the direction now. You set the standards. You define what love looks like and what it doesn't. You refuse to be confused by mixed signals. You no longer negotiate your worth with someone who can't meet you where you are. And this isn't about building walls. This is about building discernment. You don't become hard, you become clear. You don't become cold, you become wise. You move through life with intention. You take your time. You don't chase. You observe. You don't over-explain, you express. You don't tolerate emotional crumbs, you wait for the feast that comes when someone meets you at the level of your wholeness, not your wounds. Because now you know better. You know what it costs to lose yourself for love. And you've made the decision to never pay that price again. Healing is not about pretending the pain never existed. It's about transforming your relationship with that pain so it no longer holds the power to define you. There is a point after the heartbreak, after the silence, after the tears, when you realize that moving on is not an event, it's a process. And that process begins the moment you stop asking why and start deciding how. Not how they could hurt you like that, not how they could change so suddenly, but how you will now shape your life with what's left. Because the pieces may be scattered, but they're still yours. And you can rebuild smarter, stronger. Emotional pain is one of the most deceptive forms of suffering because it convinces you that nothing will ever change. It makes you believe that you'll always feel this way. But pain is a temporary visitor. It stays longer when you keep feeding it. What you focus on, you feel. So when you constantly replay what happened, when you keep rehearsing the betrayal, the lies, the abandonment, you're feeding the energy that hurt you. Healing begins when you consciously start feeding something else. Feed your mind new thoughts. Feed your body new habits. Feed your soul new meaning. Because energy moves where your attention goes. And if you want to move on, your attention must move first. Most people think healing is about forgetting the person, but true healing is about remembering yourself. Because heartbreak has a way of stripping you down, not just emotionally, but spiritually. It makes you forget your worth, your glow, your light. It makes you feel like you're missing a piece when in reality, they just distracted you from your own wholeness. So moving on becomes less about erasing them and more about rediscovering you. Rediscovering the part of you that can laugh again without bitterness. The part of you that believes again without fear. The part of you that trusts, not because others won't hurt you, but because you now know how to protect your peace if they do. Letting go is not weakness. It's a decision to no longer carry what isn't yours. Their choices, their issues, their inability to love you, those were never your burdens to bear. But when you hold on to resentment, when you clutch the story of how wronged you were, you give them power. You give the pain a seat at the table of your future. And that's not where it belongs. Forgiveness isn't about them, it's about your freedom. It's about choosing to take your life back. Not because they deserve it, but because you do. You start letting go when you stop checking their social media, when you stop decoding their silence, when you stop asking mutual friends what they're up to. Those may seem like small actions, but they are massive declarations of independence. Every time you don't respond to their message, every time you don't revisit the memories, every time you interrupt the thought that begins with what if, you are cutting the cord. You're sending a message to the universe that you are ready to heal, to evolve, to rise. Healing also requires you to stop blaming yourself. Maybe you think you should have seen the signs. Maybe you're angry that you stayed too long. Maybe you're embarrassed about how much you gave, how deeply you loved. But blaming yourself only extends the pain. It ties your present to your past in a way that leaves no room for growth. You must forgive yourself, not because you were wrong, but because you didn't know what you know now. And that's the point of pain. It teaches, it elevates, it refines. Let your past be your teacher, not your prison. Moving on also means creating new experiences that don't include them. Start saying yes to things you used to say no to. Revisit passions you put on hold. Meet new people, even if it's just a simple conversation. Get out of the environment where everything reminds you of what was. Change your routines, change your scenery. Change your energy. Because if you keep living inside the shell of your old relationship, your new life can't breathe. You've got to make room, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, for the new version of you to exist. It won't be linear. Some days you'll feel on top of the world, and others you'll feel like you've taken 10 steps back. That's okay. Healing isn't a straight path. It's a spiral. You revisit old wounds, not to suffer again, but to see how far you've come. You'll cry, then laugh. You'll miss them, then feel grateful they're gone. That's growth. That's the emotional detox happening. Don't fight it. Let it move through you, because every wave of emotion you allow to pass without acting on it is another layer of your freedom being built. Eventually, you start to realize something beautiful. You realize that peace feels better than being right. That your energy is too valuable to be spent on what no longer feeds your future. You realize that the person you were mourning was only one chapter, not the whole book. And when you get to that level of awareness, their name no longer carries the same weight. The memories no longer trigger the same emotions, and the heartbreak that once consumed you becomes the very soil from which your new self grows.